You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 20th of December 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello there and a warm welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up in the next 30 minutes.
These were modest agreements that were reached and rendered by both parties in an honest and public agreement. The Speaker of the House broke his word.
Trump and Musk cause chaos as the US heads towards a government shutdown. Is this a taste of things to come? Also coming up, the European Union takes the UK to court over the protection of its citizens' rights. We'll ask what might happen and what effect it could have on such a sensitive relationship. Plus, we'll enjoy a taste of festive food as well. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Delays, threats, new plans, division. America's politics has endured a pretty febrile 24 hours, all arguably down to the incoming President Donald Trump and his government budget czar Elon Musk. What had promised to be a reasonable bipartisan agreement on a spending plan for the government was kiboshed by Messrs Trump and Musk yesterday afternoon. Another plan for the United States budget put forward by Mr Trump was rejected, and all the while, thousands of federal workers are wondering whether they'll be earning anything from tomorrow and indeed over the Christmas period. Well, Scott Lucas is adjunct professor at the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin, joins me once again on Monocle Radio. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Emma.
A busy 24 hours. What was in the original bill and what went wrong?
Well, the important dimension of the original bill was simply to keep the government funded for another few months, what's called a continuing resolution. In addition to that spending authority, there were certain specific measures. One was, for example, to provide about $180 million to fund a research center over cancer in children. Another measure, which would have been quite significant, was to sort of crack down or limit the profits that can be made by what were called pharmaceutical middlemen, as it were. Those folks who, as you get authority for drugs and as they're distributed, take their cut, as it were, of the money that's to be made. But the reason why first Elon Musk and then Donald Trump came out against this bill probably was Trump's demand that there be a lifting of what's called the debt ceiling of the U.S. government. In other words, that he would have unlimited spending authority once he took office in 2025.
So, as you just suggested, is it true that Elon Musk really did do all this?
I mean, all I can tell you, Emma, is that on Wednesday, after the bipartisan deal was announced, and I emphasize bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, Elon Musk put out 70 tweets, 70, trashing the deal, saying that it was awful, that no decent Republican can support it, and that this was all part of his attempt to make government responsible. Donald Trump, in the afternoon, after most of these tweets appeared, then chimed in on social media and said there's no way he would support this deal, and any Republican who did so simply would be out of favor. Now, it raises the question whether Trump knew in advance or his team knew in advance about Elon Musk barrage, or whether Trump, in this case, was following Elon Musk and, in fact, had not chosen to oppose the bill until the guy who owns X, Tesla, and SpaceX decided that something should be done.
Why would Donald Trump want a shutdown of the American economy 4 weeks before he becomes president?
I think the specific issue is the one that I've mentioned about this idea of the debt limit. I mean, it's widely expected that Donald Trump, who doesn't have many coherent economic policies, but that the one thing that he did when he was in office in 2017 was to get the largest tax cut, or one of the largest in American history, which benefited the wealthy by and large and benefited a lot of his friends. It's expected he would do the same thing in early 2025. But the problem with a large tax cut is that fall in revenues means that the record-setting American debt would spiral even higher. And the debt limit doesn't allow you to do that. So he wanted to get that removed. But I think there's a wider issue here, and that is that Donald Trump is effectively trying to bend and even arguably break the U.S. system, that this is his authority across all of government, and he doesn't want an independent Congress, and he does not want Republicans challenging him in Congress. And this was a way, especially to undermine the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, a Republican, by just ripping this deal apart and showing Johnson as being powerless.
The interesting thing is that a bill put forward by Donald Trump didn't go through at the end of last night, and the Republicans were part of the group that turned it down. So is there a sense that the Republicans are already starting to stand up to Donald Trump? Because they endanger their own political careers if they do, but they endanger much more if they don't.
I think that's an important point that you've raised, which is that when this substitute bill was put together very hastily on Thursday, which included the removal of the debt limit, but did not include provisions that I mentioned, such as that funding for research into children's cancer or the attempt to limit pharmaceutical prices. There were 38 Republicans who defied the whip, as it were, voted against the measure. And of course, with almost all Democrats opposing it, there's no way it could pass. Now, those 38 Republicans are not anti-Trumpers per se. They're not from the center of the party. A lot of them are from the hard right of the party, but they were opposed, in particular, to raising the debt limit. And some of them were just upset with the way this was done. So it is this wider issue going beyond this government shutdown, going beyond funding. Will we see elements of the Republican Party who will not follow Donald Trump's my way or the highway once he takes office?
Scott Lucas, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is 6 minutes. No, I'm telling you a fib, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 minutes past midday. Quick look now at the latest news headlines. Here's Anita Riota.
Thanks, Emma. Malaysia will resume its search for the wreckage of the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The hunt restarts 10 years after the flight disappeared and will pay out £70 million if anything substantive is discovered. Italy's Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini, will receive a verdict today that could see him spending 6 years in prison. Salvini has been accused of kidnapping after he prevented a boat of migrants from docking in Italy for nearly 3 weeks back in 2019. Myanmar's military reportedly now only controls less than 1/4 of the country's territory. The junta now controls major cities and remains extremely dangerous, according to the UN. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Anita. The European Union is taking the British government to court over alleged violations of the rights of EU citizens in the UK. Brussels claims there are several shortcomings in the way the British government implemented European law, and this adversely affected the 3.5 million or so EU citizens who lived in the UK. Well, Quentin Peel, regular Monocle Radio contributor, joins me in the studio. Good afternoon, Quentin.
Hi, how are you?
Well, probably better than those who've just been served something from the European Commission about the treatment of EU citizens in the UK. Let us, if we can bear it, wind back to about 4 years ago this next week. So it's end of 2020. The big red eject button is being pushed as the British nation removes itself from the European Union. Brexit is happening. And at that point, there's sort of a huge severing of ties at absolutely every single level, including citizens' rights. So what happened that's made Europe and the European Union so cross?
Well, I think it was all about the rights of families to reunite during that transition period. So before we finally exited, there was this sort of transition. And the Home Office was obviously behaved as the Home Office always does, in rather an unpleasant way towards anybody who wants to come to the country, and actually made it very difficult for wives and families and children, or husbands and children, to join their partners in the UK. And I think that's what it's all about. But it's all rather historic, and one wonders if it's really very serious. It seems a bit more like the Commission going through the motions.
Indeed. I mean, because European law does this. It takes its time. And it is often there, more often to establish a principle and prove a point rather than actually inflict any kind of serious damage, not least because of the duration of these cases.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, they produced a list of about 70 cases that they were pursuing the other day, and of which there were only 2 which were the UK. So I think we may be getting perhaps a little overexcited. But it does underline the fact that the public effort that Keir Starmer and his government are making to reset the relationship between the UK and the EU is perhaps not entirely straightforward, and indeed that perhaps the British government has not quite got its act together as to what it wants.
It's an interesting point that you raise insofar as these are 2 different administrations. It was the Boris Johnson government of the Conservatives, which is who were effectively the ones who made all this happen. But then, as you say, Keir Starmer trying to reset, a human rights lawyer himself. And this is something which obviously strikes heart at sort of legal and sort of moral principles as well, doesn't it? So what can Keir Starmer do or say here?
I'm not sure. I don't think a great deal, but it is rather ironic because this government, like the previous government, in spite of the fact they, on paper, are coming from different directions, seems also to be obsessed with fear at the prospect of anything that might be labelled freedom of movement. And they're still worried about that because in the whole process of trying to reset relations and improve relations again, the European Union has actually made a very positive suggestion saying, well, let's begin by doing a deal about youth mobility and that young people will be able, between the ages of 18 and 30, to move much more freely between countries and between the UK and the members of the European Union. And the British government said, over our dead bodies, we want nothing to do with it. And it seems quite extraordinary. They're obsessed by being accused by the likes of Nigel Farage that they may even be opening the door a crack.
So this is, you're suggesting, a much more domestically heated issue than it would be actually for the European Commission.
Yes, I think it is. And I think that what really worries and rather depresses me is that having made the very sensible decision to say, look, let's improve relations from what they were under the Boris Johnson and the various Conservative prime ministers, this government simply has not got a coherent position itself yet. And we're in the same old situation that we were before with the European Commission, that the British government goes round in circles trying to decide what it wants, leaving endless time for the European Union to actually agree on rather firm positions, saying, well, we're not going to allow any cherry picking. We aren't going to allow them to have the bits they want and not the bits we want. And the whole negotiation gets bogged down.
And do you think a case like this will push minds in any one direction or another in Brussels? Or is this just, as we've mentioned before, the idea that the European Union, the European Court of Justice has to be seen to be upholding the principles and the rules and regulations that Europe cherishes so closely?
Well, that's what it is, and that's what we have apparently always found rather difficult to live with. But I think that the UK government is trying to find a sort of back door back into the whole process through the vital subject of defence and security. And that seems to be what they're hoping the next round of getting together will be all about, when Keir Starmer goes to meet up with all the 27 leaders for the first time since Brexit in February next year, when they're going to talk about what more can they be doing on defence and security. And I think the British see this as a sort of back door back into a form of single market without saying that it's a single market. It'll just be for defence procurement.
The defence issue is, however, that one area which very few people say that closer union should not happen here, isn't it? I mean, is defence the one thing that will be that backdoor?
Yes, I think that is the hope, although, again, it doesn't seem to have been really worked out very well, and you've still got this tension, if you like, between what the British have always seen, that the primary leader on defence is NATO, and what the European Union members are increasingly seeing, well, if we've got a real problem over the Americans and NATO with a future President Donald Trump, maybe we've got to really do much more to get our act together within the EU. And so somewhere there, they've got to bridge this gap, if you like, in perceptions. And again, it's up to the British to say what they are prepared to do.
Quentin Peel, regular Monocle Radio contributor, thank you so much for joining me back in the studio once again. You're listening to The Briefing. We're going to spend the rest of our programme talking about slightly festive things now, things to do when you haven't got other things to do. And what better way than explore the world of film and the best films that we've seen in 2024 than courtesy of talking to Karen Krasanovic, our film critic, and they're ready and poised. A very good morning to you, Karen. You're not here in London, are you? You're somewhere in another place. Where are you?
I'm in another place. I'm in rural Illinois. I'm actually in a farmhouse. So
right.
There you go.
A very good morning
but
to you.
That doesn't mean that I'm not seeing movies.
No, how do you do that? So you're in rural Illinois in a farmhouse.
Yes.
Happy Christmas and happy holidays.
Thank you. We had some snow.
Wow. Where's your nearest cinema?
It's about maybe 45 minutes away.
Okay. And have you dragged the family out to watch a film yet?
I'm planning because we got new releases. It's Friday, so there's new releases out here, and so I've got to decide. But I'm very tempted. They're going to have a 1:00 screening of It's a Wonderful Life, which of course is a wonderful, seasonal treat, and it's so different on the big screen. If you've seen it on the small screen, it's like a different film. So I might just do that.
Absolutely obligatory, as is Home Alone in the cinema as well.
I think so.
Right. Okay. So here we are. We've got 2024 winding to an end, and dare I say it, people have said it has not been a vintage year for film.
Yeah, that's right. It hasn't been. It's been a very patchy year, and some of the films are very patchy. They're not really consistent. And I think this is partially to do because of the writer's strike. There was a lot of hesitancy. Projects were shelved and then brought back. Some were killed completely. Some were shifted. So the films that we're seeing this year are the ones that sort of made it through the scrum, as it were. And not all of them are without war wounds. But we do have a handful that I think are worth seeing. And also, I think it's important to try and see one or two, so at least you've got a dog in the fight when it comes to the Oscars.
Okay, so let's start going through those which are worth travelling 45 minutes to cinema in Illinois. I think we have to start with Wicked, because that's been...
I'm sorry to say that.
It rounded the year off.
It really did. It really did. And it's the first part of two films. John M. Chu has taken a book of a musical of a book of a film and turned it into a brilliant piece of it's not sugar sweet. It's got some bitterness and some bite in it, but mostly it's colorful, flows very well. It's very entertaining. And people that I hear who've seen it say, I don't usually like musicals, but I really enjoyed this. So I think it's worth seeing. But keep in mind, having seen the script of part two, that the second part's going to be better.
Excellent. For those of us who haven't seen part one, however, who's the audience? Which audience is this aimed at? Is it family or is it everybody?
Well, I really think it's everyone. I mean, it's very broad. It's very likable. There's nothing really that anybody could get upset about in it. The songs are catchy. The sets are designed by Nathan Crowley. Are just, he did The Dark Knight and other films, but they're real and they're beautiful. There's very little green screen in this, and it just feels just like you're in a real world, and that's wonderful. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are terrific as the pair of witches, I suppose. One's a witch and the other one's trying to be or sorceress. I suppose. And it's just, it's wonderful. John M. Chu did In the Heights, which came out during COVID. It's another terrific musical. And I'm not a lover of musicals, but he can handle it really well. And that one got overlooked, but I think he's really scored hard with this one.
What else is on your list for 2024?
Okay. Well, I saw this in Venice, and it's 3 hours and 35 minutes long. It's called The Brutalist. It really is not fun. It's a long, drawn-out story of an immigrant architect who comes to America, and America doesn't really like him in the early 20th century. But it's ambitious. It's trying to do something different. It's got some lovely cinematography, and it's got some very daring set pieces. It doesn't really hang together that well. It's got a very small budget, but people are talking about it because it's so very different. So I would say if you can, if you've got 3 hours and 35 minutes to spare, buy a ticket.
Well, this is the difficulty that you've just presented us with, because you said it's worth watching, but then you've said it's not very good. So where do you find a good point?
Because it's so different, and it's a different kind of world, and it puts you in an atmosphere. And I think that that's the strongest thing it's got to say about it. It doesn't have any superheroes in it, and there's no singing. I mean, it's a serious adult film, and you can see that it's made on a lower budget. So for example, they build a building is built, but the basement is flooded. I'm really puzzled why the basement's flooded in this thing, but it's like they're trying to do a lot with a small amount of money, and they go to Carrara marble, where they get the marble from, the quarries, and it's just beautiful. I've never seen that before, not in a film anyway. So it's worth seeing. If you're a serious cineast, you should see it.
The posters which are dominating the tube exits at the moment here in London is Conclave. Ralph Fiennes, Isabella Rossellini, possibly a bit of Stanley Tucci being Stanley Tucci. Is it any good? Is this worth it?
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, it is. I mean, for anybody that's been watching any Pope movies throughout their lives, like Shoes of a Fisherman, and there's Pope, movies about the Vatican used to be extremely popular about 40 years ago, or longer actually. But Conclave, it's directed by Edward Berger, and apparently this was in production, or he was developing it before he did All Quiet on the Western Front. It's based on a Robert Harris novel about the intrigues when a pope dies and all the politics. And Ralph Fiennes is wonderful as Cardinal Lawrence. And Isabella Rossellini is virtually the only woman in the whole film. And she gets this gorgeous star turn as Sister Agnes. And it's really worth seeing. But the atmosphere, the costume, the setting, it's just breathtaking. And again, it transports us to another world. And it's not 3 hours and 35 minutes long. So bless there.
Which is a blessing. Carolyn Krasanovic, thank you so much. And the warmest of Christmas wishes to you and yours. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. 12:22 here in London. So having just heard Karen Krasanovic's recommendations of how to build up an appetite in the cinema, whether it's a family offering of Wicked or 3.5 hours of The Brutalist, we're going to be hungry after that. So who better than Rashmi Narayan, travel, food and drink writer, to help us work out what to eat and drink, or indeed do, in terms of food for the next couple of weeks. A very warm welcome back to the studio, Rashmi.
Oh, thank you.
So you wanted to start to talk to us about a rather lovely thing that you did last year, and you've got an amazing smile on your face because you're just about... she's grinning. She's giggling. Because this absolutely was... You've done something wonderful over Christmas last year, didn't you? And you want to share it with us all.
Yes. So my mother-in-law, who was stressing massively about cooking and everything, said, "You like trains, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I love them." And she said, "How about we have a lovely Christmas meal on a train?" And I first thought we're going to pack everything up and go. But she said, no, this is far more lovely than you can imagine. So we went to up to Yorkshire, and along this beautiful heritage train journey, we were served a full Christmas meal. The roast, the trimmings. We started with the mulled wine, so that was a great start. And then we had soup and just a feast, really.
Do you know, the idea of soup on a train has just made me laugh.
Thankfully, I ordered something like roast mushrooms just to keep it safe. I don't trust myself.
Something to just sort of bolster just in case we went over a bump or
just
two.
Just a bit rattly, yeah. But no, actually it was very smooth and it was stunning because you're eating and enjoying yourself. Everyone's happy. And then you have these beautiful moors. It was gloomy, of course, but it was quite scenic in that sense. And we had mince pies to finish.
Well, this is the thing, because you go on a train and then you just get... the Yorkshire moors can have patches of exquisite beauty, but dare I suggest that sort of like at 1 o'clock on a December afternoon, that might not be the moment when we see them. So what was it about it that was so lovely? Was it, being on a train is pretty darned amazing when you've got nothing to do. And secondly, having soup on a train obviously is something that I desperately need to do. But what was the most wonderful part of it?
I think that entire experience, I'd seen the entire family happy because ordinarily at Christmas everyone's stressing about, oh, have we got this out? Have we got that out? Would you like some more? They didn't have, it just took the stress away and everybody enjoyed Christmas Day the way you're meant to enjoy it. So all of us were there together. My nephews and nieces were there and all really well behaved and it was just so special. So I think it's something we will remember where we just gave the Christmas meal making to someone else, but we had this gorgeous setting and also gorged on mince pies at the end. We said, this is perfect. Everybody else takes care of it.
Goodness me. I'm not quite sure how I'd feel after a 3-course meal and mince pies in a railway seat. I hope the seats are comfortable. They have a lovely thing for children as well. They have Santa Claus. Tried to make his way down the middle of the carriage, having probably had a couple of those leftover mince pies while no one's looking. What's that like? What's happening there?
So this, I think this year they've introduced the whole Santa Claus experience so that the children are not just looking out and obviously enjoying their meal, but it's also they get to do a few fun things like make your own elf and just a bit crafty and all of that.
Make your own elf.
Make your own elf. So you get little clay bits and just
You don't make it.
No, you don't actually make it. So it's just to keep them busy as well along the train. And these trains are lovely because you have this, it's like a dining carriage. So it's full course meals with wine and everything, not as rattly. So soup was, if you think that was a challenge, imagine the wine. We're just holding on to it.
I can't imagine it being around very long. But making an elf, yes, sign me up. This is lovely. Let's move a little bit further afield. The Christmas markets of Germany and Switzerland are something which is obviously have to be seen. And what's better, well, perhaps more Switzerland than Germany, the trains are great.
Yes, and they run on time, regardless of what sort of weather you're facing, and they apologise even if they're 40 seconds late. A lot of markets are much, much older than what we know of. In Switzerland, they've got some of the oldest markets, and a lot of them are celebrating anniversaries. And I'm going to root for train journeys here as well, because, the best way to actually hop between markets is by train. So you have Interrail that's doing a lot of stops along between the Swiss Alps and Germany, so you can go to Strasbourg, Dresden, look at the Alps and what time, this is the best time of the year to actually see them in all their snowy glory before people start hitting the slopes for the ski season.
What's there not to love about that idea? Yes, please. That's next year's holiday. Let's come back to the United Kingdom. Are we back on a train again? And we're going to eat some cheese on a train now.
Oh, yes. So when we talk about cheese and trains, one place I can think of is cheddar, something I've done as well. And this was on Boxing Day because we hit that sort of slump between Christmas and Boxing Day. But anyway, with cheddar, you go to the gorges, which on their own are stunning. You have your stalactites and everything. But they have the Santa Grotto experience. So you walk in, you've got these cheese wheels all stacked up, so you're already hungry. But you also have this Santa Claus experience where... I don't think there's any elf making here, but I think you sing...
I know, we keep that on the train.
We do keep that on the train. Yeah, I think you basically eat a lot of cheese, work with Santa, go through a cave, you're singing carols, you're having fun, you're in a different world.
Wait a second. At what point did cheese become an integral part of the Santa experience?
I think the minute you enter, you see those cheese wheels, you're like, I have to have it.
Okay.
So.
Fair enough. Finally, after having eaten the mince pies on a moving train, made an elf, had mushroom soup while moving, seen Santa, eaten a cheese wheel, many of us might need a little stiffener to get us through the next few days. So talk to us about how we're going to drink our way through Christmas. I'm not quite sure many people actually need much help with advice, but it's a new idea is always welcome.
Absolutely right. I think this is the year where it just sort of inspires the whole dry January trail that follows. But for now, we're here. We're going to indulge.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know either. I've never tried it, and I don't think I'll fail spectacularly. But London's the best place for that, where they do keep the magic going even after Christmas, all the way up to New Year, where you can go to Tower Bridge, where you have igloos. So gather your mates, sit down, have a drink. Or there's one place right here near Great Portland Street where you have a greenhouse, gather your family, and it's all floral, beautiful decorations, or if you want a date night with your other half. So you've got greenhouses, you've got igloos, and you can even go to a former bank like the Ned, where they have a whole glittery Gatsby-esque party happening. So if you really want to dress up and celebrate this year, that's one of the places to go.
Rashmi Narayan, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio, and the happiest of Christmases to you. Thanks. And that's all the time we have for today's briefing. The warmest of thanks to all my guests, and to our producer Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Gunnar Grunlid, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. I'll be back with the briefing on Monday at the same time, but for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thanks for listening.